What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another fantasy football stardom and situm video for the 2019 NFL fantasy football season. Before I dive into my starts and sits for week 15, I want to say congratulations for making it another week in your fantasy football playoffs, whether it's the semifinal, maybe it's the fantasy championship. Congratulations. I was unable to make a video for week 14, so even better on you for not listening to my tips and still being able to make it. But this week, I guarantee you I'm going to give you my best tips, my best advice, my best starts, and my best sits for week 15 to help you win your fantasy championship. Before I dive into my starts and my sits, make sure that you do Gronk Spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more fantasy football and NFL videos just like this. And this is a big one, guys. Comment below both your questions, but also it says on the screen your opinion. Comment your opinion. What do I mean by this? Help others in the Bottom Line View fantasy football community win their championship. Comment your opinion on their start-sit questions, because my opinion is not the only opinion that matters in fantasy football. Trust me, I'm not right 100% of the time. Nobody is, no matter how good they are at fantasy football. So as much data that a player can get, the better for their decision in their lineup. So make sure you both comment your questions, which I'm happy to answer, but also your opinion. Get active in the comment section below. All right, let's get right into the starts and the sits. The quarterback position. Jimmy Garoppolo takes on the Atlanta Falcons, all right? Atlanta has the 26th pass defense according to DVOA, and he ranks 30th in adjusted sack rate. Combine that with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing for over 3 touchdowns per game in his past 6, and you should feel super confident rolling out Jimmy G. Ryan Tannehill takes on the Houston Texans. Drew Lock is a rookie, and he absolutely tore up the secondary of the Houston Texans. Now Ryan Tannehill, who has thrown at least 2 touchdowns and 4 in a row, plays the 27th ranked pass defense in the NFL that's allowing 265 yards per game. I like Ryan Tannehill versus the Texans. Jameis Winston versus Detroit. Mike Evans or no Mike Evans. I'm starting Jameis Winston versus Detroit. The Lions rank 30th versus the pass and 29th as a pass rush, meaning that Winston will have the time for Bruce Arians' deep passing concepts downfield. The Lions are allowing 332 yards per game at home. That is, guys, by far the most yards allowed at home. Baker Mayfield versus Arizona. The Cardinals rank dead last in passing yards allowed this season, allowing an average of 320 per game over their last 3. And then we have the old reliable Mr. Fantasy Drew Brees. Drew Brees should be absolute money on Monday Night Football versus the Indianapolis Colts, who just allowed Jameis Winston to throw for 450 yards. Indy has allowed the second most yards behind only Arizona over the last 3 games through the air. And versus this heavy zone defense, that's really where Drew Brees succeeds. He will have no issues dinking and dunking his way down the field. My quarterback sits this week. Let's start off with Sam Darnold. He plays the Ravens. In the last 3 games the Ravens have played, they've only allowed 153 yards per game. That is last in the NFL. You might be surprised to see Tom Brady on this list. He plays the Bengals. And you know what, guys? I just can't with Tom Brady. I just can't with the Patriots offense. This is a good matchup on paper, but actually you would probably be surprised to know that Cincinnati has only allowed 16 touchdowns through the air this season, and that is actually tied for the 6th least in the NFL. Plus, Edelman is banged up. He may or may not play, although he did come back to practice today. His offensive line, Brady's offensive line, is awful. He can't trust any receiver outside of 11, and maybe he has a good game, but I just feel like the Patriots will be committing to running the ball, and I don't really see a huge upside with Brady this week. Phillip Rivers versus Minnesota. Rivers In a championship game, I am not starting. He has the potential to be a disaster. He's thrown 15 picks this season, only to 20 touchdowns. Minnesota is one of the better defenses in football. They only allow 19.2 points per game, so I wouldn't expect the Chargers to score a ton in this one. Jacoby Brissett versus New Orleans. Brissett has no legit weapons at this point, and this is just not a good matchup. I just feel there are better options out there for you in your championship game. I don't see a super high upside. Maybe he gets some garbage time points, but with Indianapolis probably unlikely to run the ball with any success, I don't see success coming in the passing game or on 3rd and long for Jacoby Brissett. And my last sit this week is Josh Allen. Allen plays the Steelers. They have an elite defense who has intercepted 17 passes this season, the second most in the NFL. They play at home. This will be a dogfight, a low-scoring game. Vegas believes it will be a low-scoring game due to the over-under that it has listed. And over their last 3, Pittsburgh has only allowed 165 yards per game through the air. That's the 3rd least in the NFL. My running back starts. Let's start off with Montgomery versus Green Bay. The Packers absolutely stink versus the run. They are awful. They played the Redskins, and if you watched any of that game, you would realize they couldn't stop the run because they were committing everybody to stopping the run because the Redskins have nothing else. And they still couldn't stop it with consistency. They're 26th in defensive DVOA. I like Montgomery to have a pretty big week here. Miles Sanders versus Washington. Speaking of the Redskins, Howard, he may be back or not for the Eagles, but I think Sanders will remain the lead back regardless. Also, the Redskins rank 27th in rush yards allowed, so Sanders should have a big day, especially in a game where the Eagles should and need to win. MOSTERT versus Atlanta. This is the guy in San Francisco. He scored in 3 straight games and has really, as a double-digit favorite, a huge opportunity to score again this week. Tampa Bay running backs. I'm thinking flexes here for Ronald Jones and Barber. I think versus Jacksonville, they've been horrendous versus the run lately. They rank 31st in run defense DVOA and are allowing the 3rd most in yards per game over the last 3. I like Tampa Bay running backs if you need a flex. Speaking of flex plays, Sony Michel, especially in standard leagues, possibly also in PPR leagues, depending on who's on your roster. It is risky given the Patriots' offensive scenario right now, but Sony Michel, I feel like if there is ever a week to start him, it's this week. The Bengals allow the most rushing yards on the ground, 156.7 per game. This should be the week that the Patriots commit to the ground game. My running back sits, Joe Mixon. He plays the Patriots. They're allowing a league low 15.5 running back points per game this season, and I could see this being a blowout. Marlon Mack plays the Saints. The Saints are allowing a league low 1.12 yards per carry after first contact, and no running back has gained more than 72 rushing yards against them. So Marlon Mack had a rough week last week versus a good run defense in Tampa Bay. I don't expect him to get back on track versus New Orleans, especially in a game where they could be down and down early. Scarborough takes on Tampa Bay. Speaking of Tampa Bay's run defense, they rank 1st in run defense DVOA this season. They're allowing an incredibly low 57 yards per game over their last 3. I would not start Scarborough. I also think that the Bucs will probably win this game and be up, so that means that the Lions will be passing more so than running the football. Devontae Freeman versus San Francisco. The 49ers are allowing the 3rd least amount of points to running backs. Don't let that yards per game fool you. They're actually good at not allowing big fantasy days to running backs, and they've only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns this season. So Devontae Freeman in a game where they are double-digit dogs, I don't like the game flow or the game script for Devontae Freeman in this one. James Conner is my last sit this week. He plays the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. And yes, the Bills are better versus the pass than they are the run. But they did an excellent job versus Baltimore's number 1 run defense. They really committed to stopping the run of Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. And I feel like with the whole quarterback situation of the Steelers not having a potent passing attack, I would expect the same here, that Buffalo stacks and loads the box and makes the Steelers pass the football. So I don't really love Connor because there's a lot of running backs back there, and I understand you picked him really high and you kind of want to start him. I would recommend starting him as a flex play if you do want to start him. The wide receiver starts this week. Darius Slayton is the first one. He plays the Miami Dolphins. Slayton had a big performance last week, and that should continue this week versus a team who has allowed a league-high 23 touchdowns to wide receivers. So Slayton could have a big, long, big play in this game. Anthony Miller versus Green Bay. Miller should see a majority of the targets because Robinson will probably draw Alexander, who's Green Bay's best corner. Miller should probably feast in the slot. The Packers allow completions to the slot receiver at the 7th highest rate. Michael Gallup versus the Rams. Amari Cooper could be matched up with Jalen Ramsey, which means that Gallup will see the better matchup in this one and more opportunities and more targets. I expect this game to be a shootout, so I like Gallup to have a pretty good game here, maybe an under-radar game. I like him as a flex or a wide receiver 3. A.J. Brown versus Houston. The Texans have allowed 5th most passing yards this season. A.J. Brown has been a monster and a big play threat, especially recently. Did you watch that game versus Oakland? He's worth starting versus this secondary that's really, really bad at home. And if anything, I think this game could be a shootout as well. D.D. Westbrook versus Oakland. No DJ Chark, which means more opportunity for Westbrook. D.D. has seen 7 or more targets in 3 straight contests. This could be a shootout. Oakland had the worst, I would say has the worst pass rush in the entire NFL and arguably the worst secondary as well. They're just very bad versus the pass. So Oakland, any receiver I like, and D.D. just happens to be in that spot this week. My wide receiver sits, Juju Smith-Schuster versus Buffalo. He's coming back from injury, and now he's facing Tre'Davious White, a shutdown corner the first week back. Good luck with that. And Buffalo also happens to be a top 3 pass defense, so I'm going to pass on Juju this week. Brandon Cooks plays the Dallas Cowboys. 4 catches for 56 yards and no touchdowns in his last 3 games. Likely to draw Byron Jones most of the game. That's the best corner on Dallas. Doesn't give up many big plays, which is what Brandon Cooks is all about. So I would sit Cooks if I have a better option. Then we look at Anderson tonight versus Baltimore. Baltimore, like I said, they've been shut down versus the pass. They will pressure and not allow enough time for Sam Darnold to look down the field at Anderson. And then we have Odell Beckham. He plays Arizona. He's been playing hurt, and really he doesn't want to be there. So I would sit Odell Beckham Jr. this week. Hopefully you have the last couple of weeks, or it may have already cost you. My tight end starts. We have HIGBEE versus Dallas. 223 receiving yards over the past 2 weeks, which ranks 2nd in the NFL. OLSEN versus Seattle. The Seahawks have allowed the 2nd most tight end points per game this season. GOEDERT versus Washington. The Redskins have surrendered the 3rd most fantasy points to the position over the last 4 weeks. And NJOKU versus Arizona. He happens to be the tight end playing Arizona. He's getting healthier now. The Cardinals are the worst team versus tight ends, allowing 13 touchdowns this season. If you want to know, that's 4 more than 2nd most. And this week, guys, I do have 3 defenses that you can pick up. If you don't already have a defense that you like, I like Seattle versus Carolina. Kyle Allen has a 7-to-8 touchdown to interception ratio in his last 5 losses. I expect Seattle to win. Then you look at the fact that he's been sacked 24 times in those last 5 games. I don't like Kyle Allen. I don't like the Panthers' offense, so I like Seattle's defense. You look at Philadelphia versus Washington. They're very good versus the run, which is what Washington wants to do. Haskins is going to turn the ball over with Schwartz sending the house at him. So I like Philadelphia's defense. And then the last defense I'd like is Kansas City versus Denver. Denver, you have to remember that first matchup they had. Yes, it was Joe Flacco, and this time it's Drew Lock. Different quarterbacks, maybe slightly different plays and systems. But They sacked Joe Flacco in that game 8 times. 8 times. So they're going to cause pressure, get after Locke, and take him down. So that's points for your fantasy team. All right, guys. Those are my fantasy starts and sits for week number 15 of the 2019 NFL season. Follow me on Twitter at Mitch Milani for my NFL analysis and also a variety of other subjects that I enjoy. Make sure that you do subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more fantasy football videos just like this. I'll see you in week 16, probably your championship week. Hopefully you guys win. Make sure you leave your questions below. It's been Mitch. Thanks for watching. Peace out.